Anything to say on pages 7, 8, 9, 10, on page 11? Can you move them again? Can you be seconded? Thank you. So we move on to item agenda 5, which is the process of determining village green applications on pages 25 to 26. I'll ask Tim if he'll come in on this just to talk us through this one. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I move to that item, Chair, did we go through all the minutes of the previous hearings? I wasn't sure.
17.
Oh, sorry. Or the minutes of the... sorry.
Yeah, I think, Chair, if members are requested, if they're happy to move the minutes of the previous hearings of the licensing hearings, then that will cover it from a minutes and records point of view. So I don't know if members are happy to do that. Are those seconded, members? Yes. Is approved? Yes. Right. So, sorry about that, Chair. To cut across there. So now item 5. Yes, this is a report to committee in relation to the process for determining village green applications, and you'll see the report is prepared by my colleague Martin Jones. So I'll call Martin to present the report, please.
Yes, morning, Chair, members. You'll see is a fairly brief report, the purpose of which I suppose is twofold. One is to give the committee the background as to where we are as a council with regards to village green applications, and the other is to ask you to appoint a further Labour member to the village green subcommittee. As of last year, the council had 3 applications we were processing. One was withdrawn by the applicant in December, so we left at the moment as at the date that I submitted that report with 2, although since then we've received a 3rd application. That has just been service acknowledged, and we haven't looked at that in any detail yet. The 2 that are ongoing, one I intend to submit a report to the next committee, which I think is early April. That's in respect of an application where there's no objectors. We've taken the council's opinion on that, and that'll be submitted to the subcommittee in April for you to consider. And the other matter is proceeding to a 2-day public inquiry listed in this room here in the 2nd and 3rd of May. So subsequent to that, the inspector would prepare a report which would then come back to the committee with a recommendation from me, probably in September's committee, I would imagine. So that's the background of where we are with applications for Village Green. In 2013, you decided that a subcommittee would be appointed to deal with these matters. The present makeup of the subcommittee, I think, is Councillor Mills, Conservative, Councillor Harris, Independent, Councillor Waite, Councillor Tomlinson, Councillor Seaborn, and was Councillor Giles Davis, Labour. Now, as you know, Councillor Davis has come off the committee. We therefore, in line with the guidelines as regards political balance, need to appoint 1 further Labour member to the subcommittee. So that's essentially the purpose of my report. I don't think there's anything I can usefully add at present, unless Chair or any of the members of the committee have any questions for me. I'd be glad to answer them if I can.
Does anyone have any questions at all? So what we need someone, a Labour Party member, obviously, somebody to nominate someone for the East Bay. Parish. Is that anyone second that? Thank you. So that's done.
The members going to vote to that.
Oh, sorry. So that was unanimous. So welcome to that committee, Norma.
Thank you. I'll be happy to do it, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. What I would undertake then myself or Tim to go through some training with Councillor Parish between now and April, so that we can arrange that at your convenience.
Okay, members, then we move on to agenda item 6, the quarterly licensing committee update. We have Simone. I think Simone will be taking us through this morning. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Simone. Thank you, Simone.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update the Committee on all licensing matters for the third quarter of 2016-17, this being the months of October, November and December. The recommendations are that the Committee note and comment on the contents of this report, that the Committee note the activity report for the third quarter, and the Committee note the activity report for the annual period. This report is to update the Committee on all licensing matters, which include licences issued in the third quarter of 2016-17. Issues and findings. Alcohol and entertainment. There have been 11 complaints in relation to licensed premises during this third quarter. There have been 5 complaints made in relation to noise or disorder at premises throughout Torfaen. The licensing officer has worked closely with the noise pollution officer and Gwent Police to remedy the issues raised. 1 complaint was in relation to underage sales. This complaint was passed to Trading Standards to deal with. Other complaints include a premises serving after hours and not adhering to licensing conditions, and a licensed club having non-member events. All complaints are dealt with promptly by the licensing officer. The licensing officer organised a multi-agency evening operation in partnership with Headley Gwent Police, Torfaen Environmental Health, Trading Standards and South Wales Fire and Rescue. 1 premise was visited as part of the multi-agency operation and checks were carried out by the relevant officers. Breaches of licensing conditions were found and the licensing officer is currently working with the premise licence holder to rectify the issues. Swabs of various surfaces in the rooms at the premises were taken and were immediately tested on site to check for evidence of illegal substances using the iron track machine. High concentrations of illegal substances were found, highlighting concerns for the licence holder. Action planning is ongoing with the licence holders.
Can I just ask something on that? High concentrations of illegal substances, that's really worrying.
Yeah.
Especially if the landlord wasn't aware of anything going on in his premises.
I think the reasons for carrying out such tests is so that we can make the landlords aware and that they can then be vigilant with what is going on with their premises. I think most of the landlords are already aware that there is a problem, but when we carry out these tests, it just brings it to the forefront and they can be just a little bit more vigilant then. Okay. 5.1.4. There have been immigration issues in relation to 1 licensed premises which came to light following an application to change the premise licence holder. The police objected to the licence application and the applicant subsequently withdrew the application. The premise owner has since chosen to cease trading. 5.2. Late fees. There have been 36 premises that have not paid their annual fee by the due date during this quarter. All 36 premises in relation to licences issued under the Licensing Act 2003. All the premises paid the outstanding amounts once contacted by the licensing officer. Although this is a time-consuming task, it is a task that must be done and recovers money owed to the licensing department. A time analysis task was carried out and 10 visits undertaken in a 2-hour period allowed the licensing officer to recover just over £1,000 of fees owed. 5.3, Hackney and private hire licensing. There have been 16 taxi-related complaints during this third quarter. 4 complaints were in relation to the same driver and spanned over a 3-month period. The complaints in themselves were not serious in nature, but the fact that so many complaints had been received in relation to one driver was concerning. The complaints were as follows. The driver had been booked by the mother of a 10-year-old girl to transport her to school. The girl was upset because she said the driver was not happy because she did not have the correct money and he had to stop to get change. Elderly lady did not have correct money and driver did not have the change. He followed her into the club to get correct fare from her and she says she felt intimidated and embarrassed by his behaviour. A young lady was travelling with a driver from Malpas to Cwmbran. She complained that he criticised Malpas, saying that it was a rough area. She lives in Malpas. And then she said that he had said unkind things about her stepfather who had waited for the taxi to arrive. And lastly, a disabled couple had complained that the driver did not offer much help with their shopping and wheelchairs. The licensing officer spoke to the driver in question and told him that he had acted in an unprofessional manner towards his customers. The driver stated that he was very sorry and explained that he had been a little less tolerant of late. He had recently lost his mother and sometimes found dealing with everyday situations difficult at times. He was given advice saying that these customers had been truly upset by his actions and that he must consider how his behaviour or conversation could affect his customers. He asked the licensing officer to apologise on his behalf to the customers who had complained. He stated that being called into the licensing office had been a wake-up call. There have been no further complaints received in relation to this driver.
Can I come in here?
Yeah.
It's more of the wording at the end of the day. If, like, when it says in the first paragraph, it says that their complaints in themselves were not serious in nature. For me, if like 2 of the 4 I would consider to be serious, the fact that a driver actually followed a person into a club, if like, and basically to use the the wording where the customer felt intimidated and embarrassed, etc. For me, if like these are serious, if like at the end of the day, and so what I would say is I think we need to be a bit more mindful in regarding the wording that forms part of the report myself. That's all.
I'll take that on board, Councillor.
Yeah, Councillor Harris.
Just picking up on what Councillor Kemp said, that I know different authorities have different rules when they're looking at the licensing in regards to complaints, but I understand Newport work on a complaints basis is a points thing. Do we have the same thing? I mean, how long would you allow those complaints to go? The wording is not serious, and you know there's always 2 sides to a story. I don't know, but if there was continuous behaviour, could that person have his licence revoked, for instance?
The word that we would use is reviewed. We would review the driver's licence, and we would possibly, because he's already a licensed driver, initially we would take a delegated decision report to Duncan Smith. On a case like this, if we had received numerous complaints about a driver, firstly I would try to deal with it myself. I'd gone back to the complainants and they were happy with the way that this was dealt with. They were happy to receive an apology. Also, we had no other complaints earlier in relation to this driver. It was a little bit out of sorts for him, and when speaking to him, we realised why. If an issue cannot be resolved, and if it continues, then we will bring it to licensing panel, and it would be down to yourselves to decide which way we go with that then. We would review the licence, yes. Okay.
Everyone happy to carry on?
Okay, 5.3.3. Other complaints include drivers being given warnings due to damage on their vehicles not being repaired promptly, a private hire vehicle failing to turn up for a pre-booked fare, and a social services complaint about an allegation made against a driver, which is covered in delegated decisions below. All complaints were dealt with promptly by the licensing officer. The licensing officer has carried out 2 taxi enforcement evening operations in partnership with Headley Gwent Police in this third quarter. The operations resulted in no vehicles being taken off the road for serious defects. This is a very positive outcome, as it shows that the trade are maintaining a high standard in relation to vehicle repair and maintenance. There were 13 minor defects found in October's evening enforcement and 10 minor defects found in December's evening enforcement. These defects included light bulbs not working, first aid kits out of date, vehicles not properly sign written, and 2 drivers were sent home to retrieve their taxi badges, which should be displayed in the vehicle. 5.4. Child sexual exploitation and licensing. All licensed hackney carriage private hire drivers with Torfaen have now completed the safeguard training. The licensing officer is currently working with the other 4 Gwent licensing authorities and Headley Gwent Police to deliver safeguard training to staff at alcohol licensed premises. Letters were sent out to all licensed premises prior to Christmas asking for expressions of interest to attend the training. The Licensing Act does not allow for this training to be mandatory. This training is due to take place in the early part of this year. The committee will be updated in the next report. 5.5. Gambling, gaming and lotteries. There has been 1 complaint this quarter in relation to illegal gambling and betting at a licensed premises. The premises in question hold a club premises certificate. A meeting was held with the club's committee and the allegation of illegal betting was put to them. The allegation was denied and the committee went further to say that the allegation was malicious. They had recently had issues with a small number of members and they believe that the allegation has stemmed from them. There was no evidence to back up the complaint, so the complaint was duly closed. Work is still ongoing in relation to the implementation of local risk assessment policies as required by the Gambling Act 2005. Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent officers are working closely together to achieve this. Smoking in enclosed public places. There's been no smoking complaints in this quarter. Street trading. There has been 1 complaint in relation to street trading this quarter. A complaint was received from a member of the public in relation to an illegal street trader selling pumpkins in the lay-by opposite the stadium in Cwmbran. A licensing officer approached the seller and advised of the need for a street trading licence. The seller moved on immediately but did query applying for a licence for the future. Charity collections. There have been no complaints relating to charity collections in this quarter. 5.9. Scrap metal. Scrap metal licence reminders were sent out to all collectors and sites on the 8th of December 2006, with licences due up until the 31st of January 2017. 26 letters in total. As of the date of this report, 2 site licences have been renewed and only 5 mobile collectors. This is a large drop in the numbers of licensed scrap metal collectors. The licensing officer has contacted the police to arrange a joint multi-agency operation with VOSA, Benefit Fraud, the police and the local authority to stop and inspect all suspect scrap metal vehicles operating within Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent to ensure that they are licensed. The committee will be updated when the operation has taken place. 5.10. Service requests. There are 18 service requests recorded this quarter. A service request is recorded when an officer spends time giving out advice or helping with an application. It is any other work that has been completed within licensing that is not a visit or complaint. There are 9 Freedom of Information requests recorded in service requests this quarter. Due to changes within the business support area, these requests are now dealt with within the licensing team. The requests can be very time-consuming but are mandatory, so they have to be dealt with within a specific time period. And the following lists are the number of requests that have come through within this quarter, and the information that has been requested to be presented by the licensing team, which includes taxi, numbers of drivers from specific areas outside of Torfaen, taxis, 11 questions regarding drivers and vehicles, taxis, details regarding private hire operators, taxis, use of IVR systems with follow-up requests for the taxi licensing policy, taxi solicitor query re an incident involving a taxi or public service vehicle, licensed premises, query re premises with 24-hour opening for the sale of alcohol, animal establishments, dog breeding license details, animal establishments, pet shop licensing list, and licensing premises identification of top 3 premises with most complaints. This list shows the wide-ranging nature of these requests, meaning that each requires an individual investigation and response. While some are quick to resolve, some are more difficult and/or time-consuming. The last FOI listed, for example, was unclear in terms of the information being requested and whether this was for the licensing team only in the authority or the authority as a whole. And the information requested cannot be reported in the required format from our database. 5.11, prosecution appeals. There has been a successful prosecution in relation to an unlicensed private hire driver. The licensing officer did a joint visit to Nantcelyn Primary School, Cwmbran, with a licensing officer from Monmouthshire County Council. The Monmouthshire officer had received an anonymous complaint that an unlicensed driver was driving a Monmouthshire licensed private hire vehicle on a school contract at Nantcelyn Primary School. Both officers attended at the school and discovered that the complaint was true. Mr. Stephen Nutt was found to be driving a Monmouthshire licensed private hire vehicle without a Monmouthshire issued private hire driver's badge. The offence had taken place within the borough of Torfaen, so the prosecution was carried out by the Torfaen Licensing Office. Mr. Nutt pleaded guilty at the Magistrates' Court. The magistrates recognised the gravity of the offence and he wasn't licensed to drive the vehicle, and it was a school contract. Mr. Nutt was fined £400, ordered to pay costs of £256 and a victim surcharge of £40. Delegated decisions. There have been 2 delegated decisions made this quarter. One decision was to revoke a driver's badge after a complaint was received from social services and was being investigated by the police. The outcome of the police investigation was no further action. The driver's licence was then reinstated. The Chief Officer has also decided to revoke a driver's Hackney Carriage private hire driver's badge following allegations of illegal substance misuse. A number of complaints have been made to the licensing office in relation to this driver. A number of these complaints were in relation to the driver asking people for money. These included his passengers and taxi operator receptionists. Concern grew when the receptionist stated that the driver's demeanour had changed. He appeared tired and unresponsive, and the receptionist raised concerns that the driver may have developed a drug habit. The driver was called into T-Blind Torfaen and questioned in relation to the complaints made against him. The answers he gave were unsatisfactory. The driver was asked to undertake a drugs test to disprove the allegations made against him. The driver failed to show up on 2 separate occasions. Therefore, his licence was revoked. The driver in question did not appeal this decision. Licensing panel hearings. There has been 1 panel hearing this quarter in relation to a new application for a licence to authorise the sale of alcohol at a post office. 32 letters of representation were received, along with a petition containing 213 names. Out of the 32 letters, 12 were anonymous. The licensing officer made contact with each person who provided an address to inform them that the application would be heard at a licensing panel. It was found that only 1 person had actually written a letter of representation. The other people contacted and denied sending the letter. A panel hearing was held and the application was granted. The panel determined that the representations were vexatious. Immigration Act. Updates to the Immigration Act were implemented on the 1st of December 2016. All officers have received training in this area in advance of the changes. Application forms were updated to accommodate the changes. The changes mean that every applicant for a new or renewal Hackney Carriage private hire driver's licence and late night refreshment licence will be checked for eligibility to work within the UK. There have been no issues as of yet and the process is running smoothly. Please find attached as Appendix A information provided by the Immigration Service on the process and needs required under the updated Act. And if I could just add, the training that the officers attended, I believe that some councillors attended from Torfaen as well. Councillor Waite, did you attended immigration training at Monmouthshire? That's correct, yeah.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you for that. On the Immigration Act 2016, I notice on page 46 it covers asylum seekers. Okay, but what is the current government policy in relation to criminal checks on refugees applying for taxi licences?
Every applicant that comes to us is undertakes a DBS check. You're talking about asylum seekers. If they've not got the right to work in the UK, then they wouldn't be issued with a driver's licence anyway. So the process that they would need to follow in the first hand would probably prevent them from applying for a taxi licence. But every driver that comes to us is checked under the DBS system.
The reason I asked, I wasn't. You've covered asylum seekers, and that's different to refugees. The reason I'm asking is because the Telegraph exposed a loophole in the laws, and the committee need to be mindful of this. And I wondered if that current policy was extant, if it still existed. And the loophole was that when refugees come in, they can have a permit to work. They have the biometric ID card, like asylum seekers. But with asylum seekers, they have to visit their respective embassy and get certification that background checks have been carried out within their native country. But with refugees, those checks, that's the loophole, are not made. And as a result, for instance, 3 months ago, a taxi driver, Syrian, who committed rape, was up for trial and fled on the first flight to Turkey and back to Syria, and he's never been seen since. But the loophole, and I checked this morning, it's on some law sites, was still there as far as I'm aware, that background checks cannot be done on refugees. So therefore, you know, I wondered if that policy had changed, and this is why I'm asking.
There's been no policy change with Torfaen, although we are due to upgrade our taxi policy. So when it comes out to consultation, it's something that it will come to every councillor. So if you're mindful of that, then it's something that you could bring to us. We do the checks that we are legally entitled to do. If someone comes to our office and they have a permit to work, then we have to accept their application. They will undergo the same checks that every other driver. They're sent for knowledge and numeracy and literacy test. We do a DBS check, we do a medical certificate, and legally that is what we are entitled to do. But if someone comes to us with a permit showing that they are allowed to work within the UK, then legally we have to accept their application.
I personally can't accept that. Because what you're saying is, yes, and this is a loophole, the government at the moment allow you as a refugee to come in. You could have a huge criminal record, unchecked. Yes, the government policy says he's permitted to work and he can apply for a taxi licence. But you are saying, as a committee, because we can't do checks on that person, we as a committee have to, under the current legislation, allow that person, or you can't bar them on the basis that we can't do criminal background checks. Is that what you're saying?
If they come to us with a legal application, then we cannot refuse it legally. But you see, we do the DBS checks. What you're saying is a loophole with something that the government has set up. We are doing the checks that we are legally entitled to do. And if you're saying that there is a loophole in the law, then that needs obviously to be dealt with. But as it stands at the moment, we do all the checks that we can do.
I want to reassure the public, and I have a motion that I'd like to put forward, because I'm not comfortable with the answer and the situation as it is. And the motion that I'd like to put forward to this committee, regardless of the law just shows weakness. But this committee can make a stance. And my motion is that in the absence of a criminal record check, the licensing committee will automatically refuse to grant a taxi licence. And that's a motion I'd like to put forward. I'll repeat that again. In the absence of a criminal record check, the licensing committee will automatically refuse to grant the taxi licence.
What I would say there, and I know it's a proposition, I think it needed further discussion, if you like, before you put in the proposition, if you like. Is there a national, and so would you, the Chair, allow further discussion? If you like, in regarding, is there a national forum in which we could bring Councillor Harris's point to a fore, if you like? I know that Steve previously attended national forums in which we could possibly voice our concern to begin with, but in the interim period, and this is where possibly your proposal would come in, if you like, because it is a genuine concern at the end of the day, and the council has got to be seen to be doing the correct thing in regarding the safety of our residents. It's as simple as that. But if we go down that road, would we be doing something illegal ourselves as a council, which is fine to highlight the issue, if you like. I think we've got to put our head above the parapet, if you like, as such. But in the first instance, could Simone give information in regarding whether there's any national forums in which we can basically bring this to other authorities' attention?
I can certainly raise the subject in the Institute of Licensing. There is a meeting due mid-February, so I can take the councillors' concerns and find out how other authorities are dealing with this issue.
And could we, in addition, write to government or the organisation which oversees this from a council's point of view as well? And so we've got the officers' front, but also we've got the committee's front as well in regarding our concerns, if you like. I'm not sure who we would actually write to at this particular stage, but if it is a genuine concern for the committee, and I dare say it is, then we should be taking it further. It's simple as that.
I can certainly raise the subject at the Institute of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in the first instance we need to discuss this with our own licensed legal people, and then they can advise us how to progress this, because I mean, none of us here are solicitors or barristers, and we really do need advice, and then we can take it forward. So you know, if we look at the wording, you know, of your motion, I would suggest taking it to our legal people and then going from there, taking it from there.
If I could, would we back down?
Yes, perhaps at this stage we could request him to come here, because I felt the same as Norman. You know, we don't want to do something that is not legal then, or illegal. You know.
I welcome the suggested approach by obviously Councillor Parish and Councillor Kemp, and it might take time for a legal process to get an answer. At the end of the day, my motion is certainly just a motion that we cease we don't approve any licences without a criminal background check, which I think is within the powers of this committee. And maybe prior to what I put forward my motion, a lot of members, and perhaps even yourself, wasn't aware that there was a loophole. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's always good, Councillor, that if you have these concerns, that maybe sometimes this isn't the forum to raise them, that you could come to us at the office as soon as you found out and arrange a meeting, and we could have sat and discussed it, and then raised it at this forum, and I could have come back with some answers then, maybe.
I beg to differ, Simone. This is the forum, and also the actual, my concerns were national.
Yeah, and when you have those concerns, if you wanted to, because you can arrange a meeting with us at any time to discuss the concerns. All I'm saying is that if you were worried about this, please pick up the phone and ring, and we can arrange a meeting and discuss anything, so that when we did come here then, it would be nice that I could have researched and possibly had an answer for you then.
I understand that, Simone, but obviously this is the offence that just that taxi driver, for instance, that was highlighted 3 months ago. This is the 2016, December 2016. Yeah. I was hoping that amendments would be there. There may well be, but what you've provided to the committee today doesn't show that. So I have to, it was only when it flagged up, obviously for this meeting, that I did a little bit of research this morning, but, I'm only a committee member, and therefore I've raised the concerns at this forum. I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah. Raising it at this forum, I have, no problem with that. But to progress it, I think the licensing officer is right. We should meet, any of us who want to meet with her, to clarify the matter with the legal representation as well. But I think it should be, how can I say, deferred for another time, to go into the detail of it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. My concerns in that
Could we just wait now till Tim comes back, and perhaps Tim can advise us of what we should or shouldn't do?
Chair, do you want me to pause the webcast a sec?
Yes, please.
Where are we on the agenda then, Chair?
legislation, well, it says the Immigration Act 2016, which came into effect in October 2016.
Right. Okay,
and just to brief you, on page 46 of the pack, it highlights a number of groups where this Act covers. And I'm aware that there was, in 2015, a loophole in relation to refugees, which is not covered on page 46. You got 46 there?
I've got 46 here, yeah.
Okay. And the brief outline of it is that criminal checks are done on everybody, but cannot be guaranteed, or they're not done on a number of refugees who have a right to work in the country, or they did, and I'm not sure whether our legislation has changed, but they could apply for a taxi licence, and I believe that all they had to do was just put their hand up and make a declaration, whereas asylum seekers, for instance, have to go to their embassy and they have to have a certification that the criminal checks have been done, and therefore that will satisfy any committee. But there was a loophole that was highlighted, as I say, by the Telegraph, and also there was a Syrian refugee who was in the national news, and in September he was facing charges for rape. He failed to attend court and fled, or managed to get out of the country, flight to Turkey and back to Syria. So what I'm saying is I put a motion forward, while obviously we need legal advice and how we as a committee have responsibility. And my motion, which I put forward, regardless of whether the government changed policy or not, is basically that in the absence of a criminal record check, the licensing committee will automatically refuse to grant a taxi licence. And that was my motion. And obviously, I'm very happy with the discussion that went on, which was to seek legal advice from yourself and maybe through Simone, put this forward from the committee chair as regards to a national, and make inquiries, because maybe the loophole has been closed, but I thought that's not clear at the moment. No. But that's the situation.
Right. Well, I'm not sure I follow all of that, but what I understand the position to be then is that you'd like to put a motion that the committee consider whether they should bring in a policy around these granting of licences, that they don't grant any unless someone's had a criminal records check.
I'm happy to reword.
Is that it in a nutshell, Councillor Harris?
In a nutshell.
Right, but it sounds to me also as if, in reality, a decision on whether or not this committee wants to bring that in as a policy or not is not something the committee is in a position to make a decision on today. It's a matter that the committee rather would need to receive a further report on as to whether or not that's an appropriate, from a legal point of view, that's an appropriate basis that they can go forward on. In other words, it's a policy they can adopt. So if the motion from you to the committee was along the lines of, you put forward a motion that the committee investigates whether there is the possibility of the committee adopting a policy that they don't grant licences unless someone's had a criminal records check, but that would seem to me the way to take it forward, because really in reality you're saying we need to look into this. That's as far as we can take it today, I think, being realistic about it.
I totally accept that rewording of my motion, and as a satisfactory way forward.
Because, just so I'm clear, and obviously I don't want to put things forward that any of the committee, you or any of the committee, are not happy with, but you as a member of the committee are concerned about people being entitled to apply for licences who haven't had a criminal records check, and you need, or you would like there to be a further advice report back to committee on that issue, basically, as to whether or not that's a basis, that could be a basis for policy within the committee, that they don't grant these licences unless someone's had one of these checks. Is that it in a nutshell?
It is.
Councillor Harris, or
I'm
not?
sure you have the legal word in which I'm sure it will come back to the committee for approval. Exact wording, because obviously we don't want it to be woolly.
But at this stage, you'd like to put forward a motion that the committee investigates this as and takes further, takes a further report in relation to it, and then considers it further. Is that it in a nutshell? And I don't know whether anyone wants to second that motion, obviously, Chair, before it...
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Are we happy that we've got the wording clear, Jackie?
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Because before members vote on it,
Can I just point out
Yeah.
that currently in legislation and in our policy it already states, if you're going to consider wording, it already states that every applicant has to undergo a DBS check at an enhanced level. So that is already written in policy and it's already written in legislation. I think what the councillor is trying to point out is that he would like further checks undertaken on people who present with certain UK eligibility or...
No, because it is impossible to do checks on refugees who come from certain countries, but at the moment that loophole allows them to work in the absence of a CRB check, because what they will do is...
We already have that wording. You see, every applicant that comes to us already undergoes those checks. So what you're asking for is something plus what we already do.
No, it's not at all. You see, you can only do CRB checks on people who you've got access to their CRB record. With refugees, that avenue is not open to you. What I'm saying is, under the current legislation and the loophole allows, and the government allow a refugee, in the absence of a CRB, to make a declaration, a personal declaration, a sweared oath of allegiance, or whatever it is, to say, I haven't got a criminal record. And on that basis, he is to be granted, subject to other checks and other procedures, a licence. And it's already evident in the public domain that this has happened, and it's discussed at national level that this is a loophole in the law. So we've got 99% are subject to CRB. What you haven't had is an applicant from that, so we haven't had to deal with it. But what I'm saying is, in my motion, and what I was trying to get across, is that regardless, really, if you can't do a CRB on somebody, and that's not the case at the moment, nationally, it's not the case. I was led to believe during my checks this morning.
I'm sorry, but I am really quite confused, because our legislation in relation to taxi licensing and our policy states that we have to do a DBS check before we can even grant a licence. So we do, if someone comes to us and applies for a licence, then we do that check as part of the application. But can I just ask, are you concerned that the DBS are not checking into the history of some of the applicants enough?
Simone, can you just clarify then, that if somebody in these circumstances applied for a licence, you applied for a DBS check, if that DBS check did not come back for whatever reason, you would not then issue that licence?
Definitely
so therefore
not.
this scenario is actually already covered in the existing regulations that you are adhering to. So therefore, if somebody came in and they couldn't come, for whatever reason, a DBS check couldn't be completed, you would not issue a licence.
You would not issue a licence.
Thank you. I think that needed to be clarified.
It's basically, if you apply DBS on me and nothing came back on me, as in, then basically the application wouldn't go forward. It's as simple as that, if you like. Irrespective of whether, but I can understand where you're coming from, is a case of why hasn't my name been even recognised, I think, at the end of the day. And so basically there needs to be something that comes back, doesn't it, at the end of the day.
The DBS is not going to be based on the fact that they cannot get a criminal record check on a refugee. They can't, so they're not going to have anything negative on him. he's going to pass the DBS, because at the moment there's a loophole in the law that allows that no criminal check.
Look, we're going around in circles here. So let's just be absolutely clear. Should such an application come before this council, because it's this council we are concerned about, if such an application comes from this council, under the current policy of this council, that person could not be issued with a licence. Yes or no?
No.
Right. If that's the situation, this council is covered. I think that with regard to Ike's point that he has brought to our attention, I'm grateful for him bringing it to my attention, because I certainly wasn't aware of that. And I think that what we should be asking our officers to do is to do whatever they come within their responsibility levels here, by drawing this to the attention of the appropriate organisations, which it sounds as if it's already there, but laying our concerns there as well. But at the same time, this cannot happen in Torvine. If we can't get a criminal record check on an individual, whoever they are, from wherever they come, they cannot hold a licence here. So the people that we represent, it seems, being adequately protected, and that's what we are all about, is making sure. But nevertheless, the point raised by Councillor Harris needs to be taken forward in some way, expressing our concern about this and asking. I'm sure that there will be other people, it seems, that are aware of this, being reported in the press. So it is an issue, and if you like, at the end of the day, perhaps as a committee we should draw to the attention of the appropriate authorities. This has come to our attention, and we too are very concerned about it.
I just want to clarify one more thing. The DBS check is done by a third party, and if they are told that you have to accept what they say, okay? But as a DBS check, if, for instance, just on that one particular group, refugees, where the government allow them, so long as they haven't been shown to have a criminal record, they haven't been checked, but they're accepted in the current loophole that they have no criminal record unless otherwise proved, then they will pass the DBS, and then when you make application to them a DBS check, the DBS comes back and says they're okay. It could be that the loophole is at the DBS point. Yes, we can accept DBS, we might be covered, but if that loophole exists in the system, where the DBS accept them as not having a criminal record, regardless that there's no checks been made, that is a weakness in the system, and that's where my point lies. It is a third party, a DBS, isn't it?
Can I ask, if you like, in regarding the checks, if you like, and the DBS, do they check the refugees, if you like, criminology, if you like, from their former country or the existing country, if you like? Okay. And so that is a concern, if you like, and that is when they come to Great Britain or the United Kingdom, if you like. I can understand that their record would be unblemished. Let's put it that way. However, for call it their criminal exploits in their own country, if you like, then possibly we could be opening up a can of worms there, if you like, in regards. So I can understand where you're.
They go through against certification. But refugees who don't because of the humanitarian crisis, there is absolutely no records for them.
Tim would like to come. Oh, sorry, Norman.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think we should identify any particular parts of our society. We are looking for a criminal record in any person, not just one part of society. Do you know what I mean? Yes. Otherwise, I think we are overstepping the mark.
No, all other, from looking at page 46, what I highlighted was that all groups or, whatever, for want of a better word, within our society are covered. The loophole exists with, whether, I can't detract. The loophole at the moment, which has been flagged up since 2015 in Ontario, is only on refugees. Regardless of where they come from, refugees cannot, and I say, I don't want to harp on about it, but that's the situation.
The licensing officer has said if they are not cleared, whoever they are, they will not grant a license. So,
Could I ask Tim just to come in and perhaps try and...
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to... well, I'm just trying to understand the position, really, Chair, and I hope that it'll clarify things for members. The Council, as I understand it, from Simone, has already got a policy in place that says if someone applies for a licence, they don't have an appropriate clear record check, they will not be given a licence. That's as much as the Council can do, isn't it? That's it. Now, if there's a problem with the people carrying out the checks, that's not something within this Council's control.
I'll pick up. I totally agree with what you said, Tim. But
Right. So you agree it's not a matter within our control?
It's not within our control is a different matter. Within our control, we can't put measures in place that's beyond our control. But it comes to us as a responsibility. If we know in those control processes there is a weakness that I have highlighted today, then we should really be concerned, first and foremost. The fact that we're concerned, what can we do about it? The checks are out of our control, but for us as a committee, then we need to look at this further, first and foremost to clarify whether there is a loophole, what that loophole is, and then come back to committee on what we can do about it legally. I mean, that's as simple as that, really.
My concern, just to finish from my point of view, is that if Simone does a DBS in this country, and it comes back as the thumbs up for any individual, however, that person has got criminal activities in where they're coming from, if you like, that I don't know about, then that would be a major problem, if you like. I take on board the fact that if an application, a DBS application, is processed and it comes back with a thumbs up, or it comes back or saying no, if you like, at the end of the day, then we wouldn't process it. However, if it comes back with a thumbs up, from a United Kingdom point of view, a thumbs up, however, there's more to that individual than meets the eye because of their criminal activity in another country, I would have concerns.
Can we just try to move a bit of progress? I know we've debated this quite a bit. I think we should ask Tim for his advice, and I think that we should write off and we should highlight the debate we've been having today and ask for clarification. And after, I can't see that we can do much more than that if the government comes back and says, this is, so I don't know if Tim could just sum up and see what, advise us which way to go. Yeah.
Well, my view, Chair, would be that the committee might want to express concerns that there's apparently some sort of loophole in the relevant checks being made, that whilst we've got a policy that clearly states unless the checks come back satisfactorily, someone isn't going to be granted a licence. So we're sort of, our ship is tight from that point of view, if you like. The concern is about whether there are potential issues in the actual checking process. And in relation to that, all we can do, it seems to me, at this stage is express some concern, ask officers to investigate as far as they're able, and thereafter report back to committee.
Right. One simple question. That's all it is. Are criminal checks done on refugees? That's the question.
So, do we want to put forward a motion covering this, or do you just, or is it?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. No, I'm happy you don't, Councillor Brooks. No.
Is there any way, Mike? It is something. It is quite concerning. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for that debate. That was very interesting, and like I said, Tim from the legal department will write off and go.
No, I will, Chair.
Sorry, the licensing officer will write off.
Take legal advice, but
right. So we go. Sorry, it's been a long delay for you. Simone, we'll get back onto the report, please.
Licensing team performance. The team performance plan is attached. The activity report for the licensing team is attached at Appendix B. There's been a high number of complaints received by the team again this third quarter. The team continue to be very busy and are ensuring the service to the public is provided to a high standard. Collaboration between Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen. The collaboration is continuing to move forward and officers continue to work together, carrying out enforcement visits, joint investigations and policy reviews. There have also been discussions in relation to streamlining both authorities' computer systems to ensure similarity between both. The action to be taken are that the suggestions, directions of the committee will be followed by the officers. Conclusion summary that the team are dealing with complaints and service requests on a priority basis, as well as a number of delegated decisions and prosecutions. The recommendations are that the committee note and comment on the contents of this report, and that committee note the activity report for the third quarter and the activity report overall for the annual period. And that is the end of my report, Chair.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simone.
Been very interesting this morning. Do you need to go through any of these this paperwork now, Simone? Or
Did you want to refer to the activity report for the third quarter?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So I believe it's the figures that we mostly look at and the percentages, and you can see that every area is on track to every target to be hit, except for the scrap metal dealers, which are the collectors. We knew that the licences were due to be renewed towards the end of the second quarter. So we held back just to see how many renewed. There were very few. I will be writing out to the ones that have renewed, inviting them in to inspect their records in the fourth quarter.
Councillor?
With regard to the comment concerning scrap metal dealers, I can only speak probably in my immediate locality, and what I have noticed particularly, because it's something I wanted to get rid of, I noticed particularly that although there were, and in fact I took the telephone number of one individual that had picked up such stuff from my home and everything in the past, and they don't ask me, I can't remember his name, but he isn't trading any longer. Apparently the benefits from that isn't really as good as it used to be, and perhaps this may be why a lot have not applied to renew their licences. So I suspect if you look around, I have only ever seen, and it is the same vehicle all of the time operating in my immediate community, which is not far from yours as well, and that individual is fairly active when you can track them down to come and shift something for you. So I think that that might be a trend, because the reward, you know, for the return of the scrap metal and everything is, I understand, to be much lower than it used to be. Perhaps that's the reason for it.
I think you are correct there, Councillor. I believe that that is the reason. The cost of scrap metal has plummeted over the last 3 years since the implementation of licences for scrap collectors. But what I will say is that it is on the rise. It is coming back up, and we, the last 2 weeks since Christmas, we've had, I think, 1 or 2 others come in to submit new applications. So those figures should go back up. But I have arranged to work with the police sometime in February just to do some checks, just to ensure that the ones that haven't relicensed are still out collecting without the relevant licences.
Chair, in regarding page 74, the gaming applications, under the betting shops, there's been 12 applications. Are those a mixture of new betting shops or renewal of applications, licences?
Most of them would be renewals. I'm not aware of any new betting shop arriving in Torfaen. I've definitely not dealt with our application. Renewals of bingo halls, betting premises, the little areas that have the machines, they're renewed as well. So that's what they would be.
Is there anything else on the...
I believe that we accept the report. Extremely comprehensive.
Thank you very much. And I think that brings us to the end of this morning's meeting. Thank you once again for all attending, and it's been a very interesting meeting this morning. So with that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.